engage in a kind of psychological and emotional process that makes sense. It's not just enough that it's right or wrong. And the other side of that is that for people in our culture who are wanting to engage in change, they often get snagged in all sorts of judgmental and shameful processes around the whole thing that are totally counterproductive. It's actually something of a spiritual and psychological skill to be able to look at oneself and say, I'm smoking because I really enjoy the experience of taking the breath in with the smoke. I enjoy having a break from my activities. I really enjoy it. And not to be shamed about that, not to feel bad about that, just to acknowledge, I really enjoy that. It calms me down. I happen to be sensitive to nicotine, and it calms me down. These are real things. When people get into kind of shame and blame around themselves, it's typically, I know I shouldn't be smoking. It's useless. I've seen so many people say, I know I should be meditating more. Useless. It's self-blame. It doesn't go anywhere. What we really need to do, and it's part of the contemplative contemplation phase that De Clemente and Prochaska recommend, is a very, very careful emotional and cognitive assessment of what are the consequences of change for me, pro and con. And I would emphasize for most people the con. What's the danger of changing? Most people do not pay attention to why I'm where I'm at and the upsides of staying where I'm at. And unless we can emotionally and cognitively acknowledge that, we ain't going to move. So we really have to, in a friendly, compassionate, empathic manner, appreciate, you know, I actually enjoy watching television at 10 o'clock at night rather than sitting and meditating. For now, okay, can we just know that about ourselves without blame, without shame? Television is soothing. Most people don't even think about it in those terms. Sometimes it's educational. Sometimes we do it with our partner or with friends. It's a social event. So you're going to give up TV at 10 o'clock in order to sit. You're giving up a lot of things. Maybe you feel that meditation will calm you down. Maybe you feel it will sharpen your attention. Maybe you feel it will lead to a certain kind of spiritual freedom. That's what you've heard or that's what you've seen. And those would all be good reasons to consider changing. But we need to be weighing these things against one another and what wins out and why. It's actually a very complicated, interesting, curious, rich process. And it needs really emotional engagement and honesty of, yeah, there's this kind of numbness that sometimes comes along with watching television that actually I need at the end of the day. Okay, we honestly acknowledge that. It's not bad. That's who we are. Meditation promises some sensitivity, some calm, some attentional sharpening, some freedom ultimately. Do I go for it? Well, I'll experiment with 15 minutes of television. But it really requires acknowledging that, I'm giving up sitting with my friend. It's giving up learning about the world through the news or watching educational or watching some beautiful stuff or just enjoying zoning out. And within a psychosomatic framework of our culture, can we just appreciate that there are really psychological and somatic issues that are occurring when we're watching television that are beneficial. It's really important. There are benefits when we go drinking with my buds. I'm wiping out the world. The world's too hard without alcohol. So, what are the consequences of changes for oneself? What are the consequences for changes for others? If I stop watching television with my partner and I want to go sit on a cushion alone, partner might be very unhappy. I want to go to a retreat, partner might not like it. It's very important to consider. Or my partner may get some time alone that they've been wanting all along. It may be a very, very big benefit. So, what are the consequences of change for others? What are the reactions of the self as a consequence of change? I stop smoking. Now, all of a sudden, in the old days, whether it be the Marlboro Man or the Virginia Slim woman, there might be images that we associate with the activity that we're doing. My self-image. I go to a bar at 9 o'clock at night because I'm a hail fellow, well met. That's a sense of self that I have. And if I instead I'm going to be home in a small room sitting on a cushion, my sense of self is changing. I'm giving up some moments of a sense of self as this hail fellow, well met. And now all of a sudden, I've got this sense of self as a meditator. Now, that may be very, very positive, but there may be a loss that is important to acknowledge. What are the reactions of others as a consequence of change? How are people going to see me? Well, all of a sudden, Harvey's a snob. He no longer comes to the bar. Or, there's some people, spiritual people I know, and now I'm saying I'm meditating 20 minutes a day. It's like, oh, you're a serious meditator. And they're happy. So there are self consequences and there are other consequences in terms of change that we need to look at in a sober manner, without blame, without shame. It's so important if we're engaging a process of change to be aware of the tendency to include all sorts of shaming and blaming in the undertaking. And it just eats up energy and capacity for making decisions. It's really, really a challenge to look at the subtle yet profound ways in which we wish not to change. So recently I was engaged in a kind of news fast. I decided not to look at the news for a period of time. And because I look at the news a lot and it affects me a lot. And I'm still on the news fast, but recently I've been going through some stressful things related to our property. And I notice that I just want to grab my phone and look at CNN. And it's like a tranquilizer. It's like, oh, I want to get distracted from and be away from this difficult situation that we're dealing with. And I want to have this escape into the news. The news itself is sometimes very, very stressful, but it's a move away from the stress that might be associated with this particular situation I'm dealing with. But it's subtle. It's in the body, it's in the mind, it's in my emotions, it's in the habit patterns. It's like I just want to reach for my phone and I can feel that it's time to reach for the phone. And it's wonderful to be able to notice that pressure to engage in a certain kind of self-soothing. A lot of what we do that prevents change is probably seeking some kind of inner regulation, some kind of inner regulation. And there's nothing wrong with seeking and being successful with inner regulation. But meditation might be another form of inner regulation, differing from watching the news or engaging with the news. But again, can we engage with this kind of process with a kind of really just sober, compassionate empathy for ourselves that, up to now, the way that I've dealt with stress is with TV, with the news, with alcohol, with smoking. Some people engage in other addictive behaviors, the core of which are often some form of trying to tamp down inner dysregulation. And a capacity to actually appreciate and experience what dysregulation feels like is an important part of the process in assessing our capacity and moving towards change. So I'll just summarize again that, if you're thinking about changing with respect to anything in your life, there are stages to the process. And if you want to know about that more carefully, I think that probably online, without even buying the book, you could probably find a fair bit of information on Di Clemente and Prochaska's understanding of change. It occurs with causes and conditions. If we're trying to make something different, we need social support, we need information, we need guidance, we need emotional enthusiasm. It's a real issue for us to get emotionally enthusiastic about moving in a different direction. Sometimes that might be inspiration if it's a spiritual issue. These are all causes and conditions, very much in line with the Buddhist understanding that we move because of causes and conditions. We're very, very lucky if we have inspiring figures in our lives to support us to move towards a spiritual perspective. What a gift and what a blessing. And maybe we read something that is inspiring to us. And part of it is we have to know what works for us. Some people, books do it. Some people, books don't do it. It's podcasts. We live in the modern world. Sometimes it's art. I have some artists on board this morning. Sometimes it's art that moves us. Maybe we need to go to beautiful temples to be inspired to meditate. So we need to know how to work with ourselves and be kind to ourselves anytime that we're engaging in some kind of movement towards a change, towards the positive, move towards the difference. Please be aware of all the ways in which you may be inclined to shame and blame yourself, and start with being compassionate and curious about the upsides of the non-change status quo. It's really, really a profound endeavor. And again, for those of you who are just tuning in, I was just giving a talk on the issue of change at the beginning of the new year. The talk will be posted. You're welcome to check it out once it's been posted. And it's based on material from this book, Changing for Good by Prochaska and Di Clemente. So we are at 11 o'clock Central Time. I welcome all the new people who've come on, and we will just take a moment. There may need to be a change from one something to another, and within about a minute, we'll start our meditation program. Lovely to see everybody for the new year. It's great.